Alright. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&Done, your guide to one D&D. So, today, we're going to be continuing going backwards through the September 2022 playtest material for one D&D. We're doing it backwards because Wizards keeps writing it backwards. So today, we're going to be talking about feats. Quick reminder, if you do enjoy this content, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super important. Let's keep going. So, feats. Feats have had kind of an interesting history in D&D in general. Excuse me. I still feel absolutely horrible. So if I seem scatterbrained more so than usual, which I think would be pretty hard to figure out, but whatever, it's because I feel like shit right now. But I want to get a video out. So, feats first showed up in 3rd edition, and they were these tiny little piecemeal things that helped you to kind of customize your character, but they really didn't, because 9 times out of 10, most classes would pick the same feats because they fit with how the class worked. We go up to 4th edition. Feats are still the piecemeal, but they actually have kind of different categories of feats. You have feats that are based on your race. You have feats that are not based on your race, but are exclusive to your race. You have feats that are exclusive to your class, and then you have more general feats, and then you also have multi-classing feats. They were still piecemeal, but it meant that every class had their own selection of feats, so you weren't taking, paladins, barbarians, and fighters weren't all picking from the same list of feats and picking the same feats. Like, most martial classes took power attack. Because it would open up cleave eventually, if you were going to be a more offensive martial class. The only time that was really different was Rangers, because if they were doing more weapons melee stuff, they were doing 2-weapon fighting, and they had a whole other list of feats that they had to take in order for the class to work. So we get to, and you also, in 3rd edition, you got feats every other level. 4th edition, you got feats every level. 5th edition, they wanted to change things up. They wanted feats to feel really, really special, and they wanted them to mean something. So feats you only get every roughly 4 levels, unless you're a fighter, then you get a few extra. And they were meant to not be piecemeal. They got rid of what are called feat trees, which was basically, in order to take this feat, you had to take this one, this one, this one, this one, and then this one. And this is the one that you really wanted, but you couldn't just take this one because that was actually useful. The rest of these you had to take to actually get to the useful thing. And I've talked about that before, just about how bad design that is, to kind of dangle something that players want and make them go through this really boring, arduous process to get it, because what they actually want isn't balanced unless you force them to do all these other things first. To me, that's bad game design. So feats in 5th edition got rid of feat trees. For the most part, they got rid of a lot of like prerequisites in general. Like, they did have prerequisites. They tend to be relatively simple. Especially if you look at the PHB. Prerequisite would be like, charisma of 13, or dexterity of 13, or proficiency in light armor. Pretty easy, basic to understand things, compared to, especially if you looked at some of the requirements in 3rd edition, where you might have you might have 1 or 2 different feats that had their own feat trees to get to be able to take a single feat. It got confusing. So, 1D&D is continuing with feats, but let's just say they're changing the things up significantly more than the first level feats that we've already talked about. So, yeah, I think we need to just dive into this to really talk about everything. So, yeah, moving on. The first thing they do is talk about the parts of a feat. We've already done this before. They have a level. Each feat has a level. To take the feat, your character must equal or exceed the feat's level. That we already knew about. I believe all the feats here are considered 4th level feats, except possibly the epic boons. Yeah, epic boons are 20th level feats. So the only ones that are not fourth level feats are the epic boons, and the fighting styles, I believe, are 1st level feats. Yeah. So for the most part, we're looking at 4th level feats, and most of the feats that we see here have existed in D&D 5th edition already. I don't think almost any of them are unchanged from what they were in 5th edition. But if you're trying to get kind of your head around the idea of, well, what kind of is the power level of a 4th level feat, and almost any feat in D&D 5th edition would be considered a 4th level feat. I have not seen any other, like, 8th level, 12th level, anything like that. There have only been 4th level feats, 1st level feats, and then epic boons or 20th level feats. We'll talk about that in a second. Now, one thing they do kind of to change in this, they do mention bonus feats at 20th level. A DM can use bonus feats as a form of advancement after a character reaches 20th level, a way to provide greater power to characters who have no more levels to gain. With this approach, each character gains 1 feat of their choice for every 30,000 experience the character earns above the 355,000 XP, which is max level, 20th levels, 355,000 experience. Epic boon feats are especially appropriate for these bonus feats, but a player can choose any feat for which their 20th level character qualifies. So, this is not new guidance. In the DM's guide, they actually talk about after 20th level enhancements and things, and that's actually where epic boons come from in 5th edition. Was one of the suggestions for players that wanted to continue playing 20th level characters and still wanted their characters to get better and to improve. So they introduced the idea of epic boons in the DMG. However, very few people actually play 20th level characters, much less play 20th level characters enough that they can earn enough to earn an epic boon. So there was also guidelines in the DMG that epic boons could also be used for lower level characters if they did something really amazing. But as DMs, remember that these are designed to be very, very powerful. So if you give it to a low level character, understand it's going to massively change how the character plays. Now they're kind of opening it up to any and all feats you can just take, which again I guess is kind of interesting. I haven't played enough with epic boons in 5th edition to really know if they're that useful, an incentive for players to want to continue playing 20th level. I think I've only I've run, I think, 1 tier 4 adventure in the almost decade that I've been doing this stuff, and I don't think anyone was level 20 in that adventure. I think most of them were like 17 or 18. I think one of them might have been 19. It was super fun. As much as a lot of people will decry that tier 4 D&D is not fun for the DM, it is. Because you can do crazy stuff, and you can do stuff that feels like you're just being a dick to the players. Like you can put traps in that have massively high, you can put traps in that have impossible level DCs for people to detect, and you can make them do just insane amounts of damage, and the players can still succeed. You can just be outright mean to your players at tier 4, and it won't feel unfair. You have to be in the right mindset, but tier 4 D&D is a lot of fun. That's, again, we've already talked about this. Let's actually go into the feats themselves. The first feat, ability score improvement. And this is where 1D&D really distances itself from D&D 5th edition. And it's one of the reasons why I continue to believe that 1D&D is D&D 5.5. Or if you want to use an earlier nomenclature, earlier name for it, we can call 1D&D Advanced 5th Edition. The reason why, in 5th Edition, the Player's Handbook, which is Vanilla 5th Edition, it specifically says feats are an optional thing that you can use to add a little more complexity. And so that's why whenever you hit 4th level in any class, it'll say ability score improvement. You can choose to improve. You can increase one ability score of your choice by 2, or you can increase 2 ability scores of your choice by 1. You can increase an ability score above to 20. So they would say that, and then they go, or you could choose to take a feat. The reason that they did that was so if you didn't want feats to be a part of your game, because they do pretty drastically change how the game is played. And we'll talk about a couple of the feats that they actually had to tone down in the 1D&D version because of just how game-breaking they were, especially at low levels. So D&D 5th Edition, all the balance and everything in the game was built around not using feats. And most of the balance, not all of it, most of the balance was built around not using magic items. 5th Edition, all the special cool stuff you were supposed to get, the vast majority of it was supposed to come from your character improving. It wasn't supposed to be, oh, I got this cool sword and now my entire basis of my character is based around this sword because it's so powerful that I change everything I do so I can use this sword. It wasn't supposed to be, oh, well, I took this feat and then this feat and then this feat, and so every single thing that I do in combat is because of a feat, and I don't use any of my base class abilities whatsoever. And technically, my class ability is just to get me hit points. They wanted to move away from that because in 3rd edition, that could happen. Like I said, a really, really common thing in 3rd edition was to take a barbarian, then take power attack, and then take cleave, and then take great cleave. And generally what would happen is the barbarian would rage, they would go into a group, and then they would, a group of smaller enemies, and they would go in, they'd attack one, and then they'd just cleave through everything around them. Because they could do pretty decent damage in a single hit, and as long as they knocked the thing to 0, they could just keep swinging over and over and over again. And so, other than the fact that they were raging, which they didn't need half the time, other than the fact that they were raging, it really didn't matter they were a barbarian. Most of their power was coming from whatever magic weapon they had and great cleave. Like, that was what they were doing. So, they wanted D&D to be about the classes. Originally, D&D Next was supposed to be, they were trying to bring back stats being really, really important. And attributes, I mean. The specific attribute score that nobody thinks about for their character. They just go, oh yeah, my dex mod is 3 or something. They never think about, oh, I have a dexterity of 16. It's always, my dex mod is 3. Even if you say, I have a dexterity of 16, people think, oh, plus 3 mod. And so they wanted people to really, really kind of focus on, you know, what is it that makes up your character? And so they were trying to make attributes really important. That fell through. And then they went, well, no, we want the class to be really important. And that didn't fall through. The classes are really, really cool in 5th edition. It's one of the things that 1D&D seems to be moving away from, and people are not liking it because 5th edition did it really well. Well, with ability score improvement, the feat, it is the identical thing. Like, I read the text from the feat when I was talking about the 5th edition version of it. It is 100% the exact same thing. All they're doing is they're reclassifying it as a feat so that now feats are no longer optional. You have to use feats. They are built into the system. Now, can you take the ability score improvement feat every single time? Yes. However, as we talk about the other feats here, you're going to realize really quick the ability score improvement feat is one of the least useful feats they have. Mostly because every single feat now, at least as far as I can tell, other than epic boons, every single feat, or at least the 4th level ones, are what I used to call half feats. In 5th edition, there's kind of 2 different categories of feats. There were what I called full feats and half feats, and the difference being a half feat would generally give you a less useful ability, but it would also give you an ability score improvement. You'd be like, add 1 to your dex, and you can do this. Or add 1 to your wisdom, and you can do this. However, full feats would not improve your ability scores whatsoever. You would just get really nice big increases. It was nice. It was fun. So now that literally everything gives you an ability score improvement and gives you extra stuff, and most of the extra stuff is better than the old stuff, taking ability score improvement, unless you really need to either bump 2 odd numbers to an even to improve your, like if you're a monk and you have a 17 dexterity and a 15 wisdom, ability score improvement would be really, really good, because you would go 18 dex, 16 wisdom, your armor class would increase by 2, your attack rolls would increase by 1, your damage rolls would increase by 1, and your key save would increase by 1 as well. Like, that is a lot of improvement. Other than in that specific instance, you are almost always going to be better off taking a feat in 5th edition than ever doing the ability score improvement. And increasing a single ability score by 2, again, in 5th edition is actually something that I've done quite a few times. But in 1D&D, it's just not going to be that useful, because the only thing you will get is a single improvement to 1 stat. And it might be an important stat. Like, again, if you're a monk, increasing your dex from 16 to 18, it means AC goes up by 1. Your attack rolls go up by 1. Your damage rolls go up by 1. So that's nice, but you lose out on a shit ton of stuff. And there are better ways to... There are significantly better things you can get with feats in general in 1D&D. So, yeah, in 5th edition, I liked the fact that feats were optional. Every single game I have ever run has used feats, but I still liked the fact that they were optional, because if I did have someone that was very, very, very new to D&D, I could just go, okay, we're just going to do ability score improvements, we're not going to play with feats. Now, that being said, I have introduced, like, one of my players in my one of my Wednesday night games, the one that I ran this past week. She was brand spanking new to D&D and almost brand spanking new to RPGs. She had played one RPG before. I was her DM for it, and it was Library Cats, which is a lasers and feelings hack. So it's a 1-page RPG. It is the most simplistic RPG you can play. It is a fantastic way to introduce new people to RPGs. But she 100% was not familiar with just kind of how crunchy, even just D&D 5th edition, which is a relatively low crunch system compared to a lot of other ones. Even though she was new to it, she started as a higher level character because the campaign was already going. And I put feats into her initial build. And then when she leveled up and got access to another feat, she chose a feat for her character. So I don't think that feats are massively confusing or anything like that. Again, I have a brand new player that is already building a really interesting, unique character with these feats. And I made the initial build after the way I introduce new players is we have a conversation about what kind of character they want. We start building the backstory, and then I go, okay, well, because of what you said, kind of how you described what you think your character will be and how you want them to play, I think we'll do this, this, and this. And then I just basically start picking stuff out for them and going, okay, and so this is what it's going to look like. What does that sound to you? And that's how I introduce new people to D&D, is I sit down with them, sometimes, most of the time now, over a computer screen. but we sit down, we talk about what they want their character to feel like, and I know the system well enough, I can make their character feel that way. And that's what I do. So, yeah, like I said, the fact that feats are no longer optional, I'm not as upset about that as I am the fact that the changes to this have made it so that not only are feats not optional, but you are doing yourself a disservice if you don't take feats. In current 5th edition, if you don't want to take feats, again, most of the cool stuff you get for your character is based on your class in 5th edition. The changes that we've seen, and I'll do videos in each one of the classes here, the classes themselves are getting less interesting and less unique, and they're starting to shift a lot of the kind of uniqueness of your character to feats. It's one of the reasons why backgrounds are getting feats now and things like that. Like they're shifting things around so that your class doesn't matter as much as the feats that you get. Which means it's kind of mimicking a bit more of what I call a skill-based RPG, which doesn't mean you have to be skilled to play it. It means that instead of picking a character class, you pick a collection of skills that define your character. And so 1D&D is starting to resemble a lot more a skill-based RPG with classes in there to add a little bit of control. So yeah, let's move on to the actual feats. So moving on. The first feat, Actor. Actor, I believe, is almost identical to the actual Actor feat in 5th edition. Like, I don't think they change anything in it, other than a little bit of wording. So, Actor, 4th level feat, prerequisite, Charisma 13, repeatable, no. Skilled at mimicking and dramatics, you gain the following benefits. Increase your charisma score by 1 to a maximum of 20. So again, half feat, but, and all feats are half feats now. But in 5th edition, it was a half feat as well. This one, while you're disguised as a fictional person or a real person other than yourself, you have advantage on charisma checks performance to convince others that you are that person. So this is really interesting because in 5th edition, you have almost an identical feature, but they use different skills. So you have advantage on charisma deception and charisma performance checks while trying to pass yourself off as a different person. So they change the wording. While you're disguised as a fictional person or a real person other than yourself, whereas that they just said a different person, which can be with rules lawyers, you can manipulate that to a lot of different things. And that one specifically, they said deception or performance. This, it seems to me that impersonating another person is no longer a deceptive thing. They're putting it entirely under performance, or at least as far as the actor feat is concerned. Now, I am an actor, and I don't know. There is an extremely large difference between portraying a character and trying to convince someone that you are someone that you are not in real life. I have done both. I'm not going to talk about why I've done both, but I have, and it is such a different set of skills to do what you think should be the same thing. It's not. Even if you are an improvisational actor where you don't have a script and you're kind of coming up with the lines on their own, it is such a different experience portraying a character in a place where suspension of disbelief is a thing compared to trying to convince someone that you are someone that you are not. So the fact that they have taken deception out of this, I find odd because it kind of implies that acting is just lying, and it 100% is not. I know some unbelievably talented actors that could not tell a lie to save their life. And I know some incredible liars, like brilliant, could convince you that the sun is green kind of liars that could not act their way out of a paper bag. They're two very different skill sets. And so I find it weird that impersonation specifically has been kind of shifted over to this is performance. Part of that may just be the fact that nobody uses performance checks other than bards, and the only time bards use performance checks is to make money in taverns. That in 5th edition, no one uses performance checks. So this might be them trying to rewrite performance checks to make them actually useful. Because right now, like I said, the only people that ever use performance checks are bards, and nobody likes that. Because you can never earn enough money busking in D&D for anything more than lodging for the night. Like that is the only thing you are ever going to get out of busking is maybe enough to pay for your room and a meal or something like that. You're never going to get enough to buy a magic item or even like a healing potion. It's just not going to happen. So performance always seemed like a really useful or useless skill, despite the fact that if you roleplay a lot, performance can be really fun. So yeah, that's that. That's not the only thing. They also have mimicry. You can mimic the sounds of other creatures, including speech. To mimic a sound or a way of speaking, you must listen to it for at least 1 minute. Any time thereafter, you can make a DC 15 charisma check performance to perform the mimicry. On a success, you perform it convincingly for up to an hour. So this is another one where, again, they give a hard and fast number. Not a big fan of that. Like I said in the other video, hard and fast numbers means low-level characters will struggle to do it, and high-level characters will never miss it. And so the only time hard and fast numbers are ever really useful is if they change by level. And again, 4th edition, they did that. All of their DCs changed based on your level. In 1 D&D and in 5th edition D&D, they just don't. They just say, well, an intermediate check is a 15. Well, no, it's not, because a 6th level rogue can roll like a 2 and get a 15. So how is that an intermediate check? There's only one roll lower than that, and yet they can still succeed. How is that intermediate? That is massively easy. So yeah, that's the only thing I'm not particularly fond about that. And again, compared to the actor thing, the 5th edition actor, it was just speech of another person or sounds made by other creature. But there was no there's no check the player made. It was a successful wisdom insight check contested by your charisma deception check. Allows the listener to determine that the effect is faked. And again, I am an actor. I used to specialize in accents. That was what I spent, I think, like 5 or 6 years, maybe longer. I can't remember anymore. I spent a significant portion of my adult life and a fair amount of my young adult life studying different accents and learning how to reproduce actual accents, not like your stereotypical like, oh, I am the French. Nobody in France speaks like that. So I spent a lot of time doing that. And one of the things that I found out was when I used to deliver pizzas, I found if I spoke in a different accent, they would tip you better. So I would just randomly change into this kind of strange Scottish accent, and I would deliver pizzas like this, specifically to women. And I lived in a town with a college in it, and so I would, anytime I was on college campus, I'd use this accent to everywhere I was there, and the girls absolutely loved it. the guys were dumb as a box of rocks. I came back one time after delivering pizzas, and I go to one of the guys that actually attended the college and worked for us, and I goes to him and I says, "It's not really a big it's not really hard to get into the college, is it?" And he turns to me and goes, "What do you mean?" And I told him about the interaction I just had, where it was really dumb. I'll tell the story some other time. And the guy goes, yeah, no. If you can pay the fees, you're in." And it was a religious college, so it was, if you can pay the fees, you can deal with the crazy rules, you're in. So the reason I say that, again, I learned how to mimic accents because I was an actor. Using them in a real life situation was a very different thing than using them in an audition, using them on stage, using them in an improv game or anything like that. Like, they're very, very different. And my ability to perform, my performance ability was not what I was using to be able to convince people that I was actually from Scotland, from Edinburgh. And it's a completely different skill set. And again, I understand that they're probably trying to make performance just a more useful skill, but it's not the same. There are better ways. Give more instances where performance might be useful. Build it into a class or something like that. Do change deception checks into performance, because performance isn't deception. In a performance, people suspend their disbelief. They actively want to believe who you are. Deception, you are literally getting someone to believe something that is not true. And so it just uses a different set of skills, and you have to look for different things, and you have to think in very different ways. You know, when I'm performing, I'm thinking about, what would my character do? You know, I'm very, very much method, even though it's technically closer to the system than method, but whatever. You're very much kind of motivation focused. Deception, you are thinking entirely about the person that you're looking at. It's like, okay, do they look like they're believing it? Are they making eye contact with me? Does this other person look like you are concentrating implicitly on everybody else, and you're really not focusing on your own performance anywhere near as much as you're focusing on how people are taking your performance. If you're an actor and you're focusing on the audience, you're going to be out of your character. So yeah, like I said, the feat itself is a useful feat. I like the actor feat in 5th edition. I like the 1D&D version of it. It's a very useful thing. Feat. It just seems really weird that they've turned everything into performance checks for it. Probably because they've called it the actor feat, but it should be called the liar, liar, pants on fire feat. Because the two things in here that they talk about are not performance based at all. They are deception based. So, anyway, moving on. By the way, that thing where I just randomly switch into another accent, that was a party trick I used to do, and it was really, really effective at getting people surprised, because I would just randomly start talking and saying things in a different accent, and people would just go. And the more that you just sell it and just kind of keep to the accent and just keep speaking and going, what are you talking about? I haven't changed my accent at all. The more it just kind of really messed with people. I actually had, I was friends with this girl, and we watched the Boondock Saints. And if you've never seen the movie, the two lead characters have remarkably strong Irish accents. Boston Irish accents, but Irish. And she was just overwhelmed with these Irish accents. Like, oh my God, those accents are just so... Man, if a man talked to me like that, just to be an asshole. I go, so you probably wouldn't like it if I started talking to you like this now, would you? She goes, stop it! So that was a party trick, and I used to really enjoy doing it. If you've been watching this video, I'm not very good at it anymore. I've lost most of the accents I used to be able to do. But it was something that was fun to do at parties. And on days that we had substitute teachers where I would be from other countries and things like that. So, actually, moving on. The next feat is Athlete. Athlete's another one that exists in 5th edition, but the 1D&D version just is better. Again, 5th edition version was a half feat, so you did get strength or dex. This one, I guess athlete prereqs strength, dex, or constitution 13+, repeatable no. Ability score increase, you can increase strength, dex, or con by 1 up to a maximum of 20. You gain a climb speed equal to your speed, which is not technically what they had in 5th edition. In 5th edition, it said climbing doesn't cost you extra movement, whereas in 1D&D it says you gain a climb speed equal to your speed. So the difference being climbing in 5th edition actually requires an athletics check to just do it, whereas if you have a climb speed, you can just climb things. As long as it is climbable, you can climb it, no check required. And that's generally how speeds worked, as opposed to doing something with a check. Could you, glide through the air if you fashioned, a wingsuit for yourself? Yeah, but there'd be a check involved. If you have a fly speed, you just do it. The next thing you get is hop up. When you're prone, you can right yourself with only 5 feet of movement. The normal way that you get out of prone in 5th edition is it costs half your movement. That is the same, and it is useful if you are being knocked prone a lot. If you're never knocked prone, it doesn't matter. But surprisingly enough, there's not a ton of monsters that knock players prone. Grappling is significantly more common, at least in the monsters that I've run. Grappling tends to be significantly more common than being knocked prone. A lot of times when players are knocked prone, it's from something they did, not something the enemy did. But it's still useful, especially, again, if you do get knocked prone. Or something a lot of people don't think about. If you are playing like a sniper type character, the prone condition itself, I'm going to look it up before I say the wrong thing. Frightened, invisible, paralyzed, petrified, frozen, prone. Yeah, so the prone condition actually has, I wanted to make sure I was reading right. The prone condition actually has some useful benefits to it, which are, if you're playing a sniper type character, when you are prone, ranged attack rolls against you have disadvantage, but all of your attacks have disadvantage. So, if you are playing a sniper type character, you can actually go make your attack rolls with whatever range weapon you want, and then drop to prone. Dropping to prone doesn't cost any movement or anything. You can just you can do it as part of your move action. However, standing up used to take half your movement, so it might be a little bit dicey. With something like Athlete, you can drop down after your attack so that it's harder for ranged enemies to hit you. Pop up, move to another spot if you need to, pop down again. Every turn you're going to pop up to make your shots, and then pop back down. It might even change the cover. Like if you have half cover and then go prone behind it, your DM might be willing to give you 3/4 cover. Which again is a difference between a +2 to your armor class compared to a +5 to your armor class. It's a big, big difference. So as much as people think, oh, there's really no good thing about the prone thing, there are quite a few different instances where being prone is actually beneficial for you. So yeah. And then the final thing has to deal with jumping. In for the 5th edition, it had you can make a running long jump or a running high jump after moving only 5 feet on foot rather than 10. As I mentioned before, the jump rules in 5th edition are just stupid. they've never been good. They're more confusing than they need to be. The jump rules in 1D&D significantly better, and now you have advantage on any ability check you make for the jump action. Again, the jump rules in 5th edition, I'm going to look them up again, just so I don't say the wrong thing. Hold, please. H-I-J. There we go. So, on a successful check, the check's total determines the distance in feet that you can clear horizontally, or half that total if you're jumping vertically. So, by giving you advantage on it, you are ensuring that you're going to be able to move more. And because jumping no longer uses your movement, whereas in 5th edition, any movement that you jump is subtracted from your total movement for that turn. So jumping, really the only time you would ever use jumping was if there was a hole on the ground that you needed to jump over. That was the only time you would ever use it, and there are so many other ways to get around holes in 5th edition D&D. No one ever used the jump rules. Now, it's technically additional movement, because anytime you're in the air, any distance that's covered doesn't count against your movement. So, the athlete feat is actually pretty useful. Like I said, the prone thing, your mileage may vary, but you can get some pretty decent stuff. And now, with advantage on the ability checks you make for the jump action, that ability check is how far you're going to be able to move. Your only limitation is you can't jump further than your maximum speed. So you can't jump further than 30 feet if your speed is normally 30 feet. But that's still a lot. And to be perfectly honest, getting a 30 on a jump check would be pretty impressive anyways. And impossible without training in a high level or expertise. So, yeah, like the athlete feat is actually really useful, whereas the 5th edition version, again, if it was one of those situations where you had like a 17 in your strength score and you needed to turn it into an 18 and you had nothing else that was an odd number, well then yeah, take athlete and get the extra prone thing. That was nice. And the climbing doesn't cost you extra movement, but you were never going to build a character around the athlete feat in 5th edition. You could use the athlete feat to create an interesting build in 1D&D. So, yeah, moving on. The next one is Charger. 4th level feat, prereqs, proficiency with any martial weapon, repeatable, no. Charger is another one that already existed, and I actually kind of liked the Charger feat in D&D 5th edition, but it was an underpowered feat. In 5th edition, it was a full feat. It didn't give you a bonus to any ability scores or anything. And basically what happened is when you dashed, you could use a bonus action to make a melee weapon attack or to shove a creature. So if you wanted to build that kind of charging style character... By the way, in 4th edition, one of the attacks you could do was a charge, which is a special standard action you could do. It was actually a viable build possibility for quite a few different classes, where you could get bonuses to your charges and stuff like that. And there were magic items that would do it too. It was actually a viable thing. In 5th edition, almost nobody used the Charger feat. The other thing that you got with the 5th edition Charger feat is if you moved at least 10 feet in a straight line immediately before taking the bonus action, you either gain a +5 bonus to the attack's damage roll if you chose to make a melee attack and hit, or you push the target 10 feet away from you if you chose to shove and you succeeded. So normally a shove, you would push them 5 feet away. This would allow you to, and I can't remember if shove lets you... Oh no, shove also lets you knock the target prone. So with the original Charger, you could dash and then either knock someone prone or shove them back 5 feet. And if you moved at least 10 feet, you could either get +5 bonus to damage, which is a big bonus, or you could push them 10 feet away. And if you did want to make that kind of controller-style melee class, Charger could be pretty useful. That being said, using the dash action meant you couldn't use your extra attack, which is meaning you were giving up at least one of your attacks, which is not great. when we go to the athlete in 1D, or not athlete, the charger in 1D&D, ability score increase, strength or dex +1. Improved dash. When you take the dash action, your speed is increased by 10 feet for that action, so that's a new thing. And then charge attack. If you move at least 10 feet in a straight line immediately before hitting with an attack, we'll try this again. Immediately before hitting with an attack, as part of the attack action on your turn, choose one of the following effects. Gain a plus 1d8 bonus to the attack's damage roll, or push the target up to 10 feet, provided the target you want to push is no more than one size larger than you. You can use this benefit only once on each of your turns. So this is very, very different. For the Charger feat in 5th edition, you have to use the dash, because the only way you get the bonus action to make the extra attack is if you use the dash. So you have to sacrifice your standard action for the dash action, which a lot of times is just not going to be beneficial for you. You're going to be hurting yourself a lot more than you're helping yourself. +5 bonus to damage is generally never going to be better than an extra attack. This, you just have to move at least 10 feet in a straight line and use the attack action. Now it limits it to once per turn, which I think is a good limitation. This could get broke real quick. It is an additional die of damage, so crits would double on or if we're using the crit rolls that we're using in this one, which is the 5th edition crit rolls, that means the D8 gets doubled as well. And the other thing that's interesting, you can push the target up to 10 feet. There's no save there. There's no check there. You don't make a shove check or anything like that. You just move the target. Now again, you can only do that once per turn, but that does mean with the Charger feat, you can really lean heavily into either being that dude. Like I immediately thought monk, just because they have extra movement and stuff like that. You could be the monk that their signature move is they run and they do a flying kick into the guy to do extra attacks. Or every time they hit, they knock the dude back a little bit. You know, you could really turn into a martial controller with this, because you can move enemies around a lot and there's nothing they can do to stop it. One of the big issues with the shove ability it was a contested check. So really strong characters, you generally wouldn't be able to do anything to. The only limitation is it can be no more than one size larger than you. So for characters that get to act as if they were one size larger, that turns into a really, really big deal with something like the Charger feat. And again, none of this requires you sacrificing your standard act or your action. It's not called a standard action in 5th edition. None of this requires you sacrificing your action. You can use the dash action, and it is better with Charger. When you take the dash action, your speed is increased by 10 feet for that action. So you do get a benefit to the dash action. But I think the most beneficial thing in this particular version is the charge attack. Just works with your attack action as long as you move. And that also means being able to either disengage for free or for some way that you don't have to use your action to do it, or just being good at taking opportunity attacks can be really, really beneficial for the Charger. The Hunter Ranger, actually, one of the abilities, I believe it's a 7th level ability, one of the things they can take is that opportunity attacks have disadvantage against you. Something like that working with a Charger would be really, really good, because every turn, as long as you have Charger, every turn you want to make sure you're using that charge attack. And if you're surrounded by a bunch of dudes, or even if you're just next to one dude, you need to be able to back up and run back into them in order to get that Charger damage. Having things that give you benefits to opportunity attacks or give enemies detriments to opportunity attacks is going to be useful for you. So yeah, overall, I like this version of the Charger feat. Yeah, moving on. The next one, Crossbow Expert. Prereqs, proficiency with any martial weapon, repeatable no. Increase your dex score by 1, because crossbows always use dex, they're ranged weapons. Ignore loading. You ignore the loading property of crossbows. This is probably the most misunderstood aspect of ranged attacks in D&D, and it specifically applies to the hand crossbow. So, crossbows in D&D all have two features that people seem to kind of misunderstand and miss. They have the ammunition and the loading properties. Most people think the loading property is the problem for the crossbow. What the loading property means is, even if you have extra attack, if you're using a crossbow, you can only fire one round, one bolt from it per turn. Even if you have things that let you make additional attacks, if you're a fighter and you use your action surge, or if you just have extra attack, if you're using a crossbow, you can only fire once. That's what the loading property means. The ammunition property is very different. Ammunition basically means you have to have ammunition to use it, and one of the limiting factors of ammunition is it says quite simply, you have to have a free hand to load the ammunition in. And a lot of people hear the word load and they think, oh, well, if I don't have the loading property, that means I don't have to worry about having a free hand, and so I can dual wield hand crossbows like a demon hunter in Diablo. Rules as written, you can't do that, because in order to use a hand crossbow, you have to have one hand free. It also meant the Crossbow Expertise feat was actually a really useful feat in 5th edition, but it wasn't as useful as a lot of people, as you might think, for crossbow users. Most of the people that took Crossbow Expertise weren't using crossbows. And I'll explain that why. I'll explain why in a second when we talk about this. But a lot of people, there was an aspect of Crossbow Expert, which is in this as well, but it's slightly changed, where it said when you use the attack action to attack with a one-handed weapon, you can use a bonus action to attack with a hand crossbow you are holding. Now, the original wording of this, and I don't know if they changed it so that it made more sense, it originally said you can use a bonus action to attack with a hand crossbow in your, I think it was in your offhand, that was loaded. Like, it specifically said it had to be loaded because you can't, according to the ammunition property, you can't actually load a crossbow if you have something in your other hand. It's not possible. So this ability was only useful once per combat unless you sheathed the weapon, loaded it, and then the next turn you would unsheath the weapon so you could fire it. But every turn you would have to sheath it so you could load it, and then unsheath so you could attack with it again. And it was a weird thing. Like, you could make it work, but mechanically it was weird. And then the other thing with Crossbow Experts, and this is the thing that most people use it for, being within 5 feet of a hostile creature doesn't impose disadvantage on your ranged attack rolls. A ton of casters, wizards, sorcerers, a ton of them would take Crossbow Expert, not because they were ever going to use a crossbow, but because being able to basically point blank shot a firebolt or any other attack roll based spell was useful. And so a lot of casters would take Crossbow Expert just so that being within 5 feet of a hostile creature doesn't impose disadvantage on your ranged attack rolls. That's what the 5th edition version. We look at the 1 D&D version. You could ignore the loading property. That's always been a thing. So you can fire multiple times per round. That's what ignore loading means. Doesn't mean you don't need a free hand. It means you can ignore loading. Firing in melee. When I first saw this, it worried me because there's a rule in 3rd edition called firing into melee, where if you were making a ranged attack roll against an enemy that was in combat with another person, you had a flat -2 to the attack roll because they were in melee, and that meant they were harder to hit. There really isn't, like, I've heard people try to justify it, like those historic weapons experts that all practice HEMA. If you've never heard of HEMA, HEMA is actually really, really cool. The people that think that they're experts on medieval weaponry because they do HEMA are not cool. But HEMA is historical European martial arts, and it's basically learning how to fight with things like long swords and other weapons that were used in medieval England and medieval Europe in general. When you say martial arts, everyone thinks, oh, you're talking about Asia. Because they were the only... No, we had martial arts in Europe. We had martial arts in America. However, we didn't call them martial arts. We just called it fighting. But yeah, HEMA's really cool. Anyway, so I hate... As soon as I read that, I'm like, please, for the love of God, don't tell me they're bringing that stupid rule back. Because it was a stupid floating modifier, and it was really dumb, and it made playing ranged characters dumb. Because you basically could only attack. And again, a -2 doesn't sound like a big deal, but it was a -2 on top of 7 other floating modifiers, and it was just nonsense. So this is not firing into melee. This is firing in melee. Being within 5 feet of an enemy doesn't pose disadvantage on your attack rolls with crossbows. They clarified it so that Crossbow Expert is going to be taken by people that want to use crossbows. I thought that was hilarious. They deal with other things later on. Don't worry, spellcasters that liked having that. There's a thing for you. I just found that hilarious. And then the final part, dual wielding. Again, they changed how dual wielding works. So there's a specific aspect of Crossbow Expert. When you make the extra attack of the light weapon property, you can add your ability modifier to the damage of the extra attack if that attack is with a crossbow that has the light property. So, what this implies is effectively, without Crossbow Expert, you can dual wield a hand crossbow. Now, as far as using two at the same time, I don't know if we can go as far as to say that that's what this says. As far as the rules is written. By the way, with how the wording was previously, it was possible to get 3 attacks per turn in D&D 5th edition with Crossbow Crossbow Expert using a single crossbow. Because the wording just allowed you to, just allowed you to make an attack with a hand crossbow if you use the attack action to make an attack. So if all you were holding was a single crossbow, you would have a free hand to load it for the ammunition property, and you could fire twice and then fire a third shot. So because mechanically it was identical to, well, let's say I just had 2 hand crossbows and I dual wielded them, because it was identical in mechanics, I always let players dual wield crossbows. Because I'm like, well, yes, we can say rules as written. No, you only have 1 crossbow. But it doesn't change anything other than you have to spend twice as much money on your stuff to get 2 hand crossbows instead of 1. If you want to put that tiny bit of extra effort into your character, why the hell wouldn't I let you dual wield crossbows? It's cool. So this one, it seems like dual wielding crossbows, you don't need crossbow expertise, but it would work like any other dual wield or 2-weapon fighting, where the additional attack doesn't add your modifier, and Crossbow Expert allows you to do that. And since they changed how dual wielder works, we'll talk about that in a second, it wouldn't, and the 2-weapon fighting style, this would be the only way to get that additional thing. Mechanically, Crossbow Expert works almost identically to the 5th edition version, except that it only gives you the point blank shot for crossbows. But it is worded in a significantly better way so that there's kind of less ambiguity and you have to do less weird stuff to play the way that you want. So overall, I like this new version of Crossbow Expert. This only works with the new way of 2-weapon fighting. This is not a feat that you would be able to just try out in a regular 5th edition game, where most of the other feats they have in here do not require you to use a different version of the rules. You can put them into your current 5th edition game and just see how they work. So yeah, moving on. Next up is Defensive Duelist. 4th level feat, prereq, Dex 13, repeatable, no. Defensive Duelist already exists in 5th edition. I love Defensive Duelist. Now, Defensive Duelist was a full feat. Again, no ability score bonus in 5th edition. And it gave you one ability, but it was a really good ability. When you are wielding a finesse weapon with which you are proficient, and another creature hits you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction to add your proficiency bonus to your AC for the attack, potentially causing the attack to miss you. I got Defensive Duelist for my monk because he kept getting his ass kicked at low levels, and I didn't have a way to increase my AC, and not low levels, at like level, I think 8 was when I took it. Because at level 6 and 7, I was just constantly getting my ass kicked. Adding your proficiency bonus to your AC is massive. The 1D&D version of it, increase your dexterity score by 1. So again, technically, quote unquote, what I used to consider a half feat. This is how all feats work, or almost all of them. All 4th level feats. Parry, if you're holding a finesse weapon, another creature hits you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction to add your proficiency bonus to your armor class, potentially causing the attack to miss. That's all you get for it. It is so useful, guys. It is a remarkably similar thing. It doesn't sound as cool as Crossbow Expert or anything else here. I cannot tell you, like, the reason they didn't fix Defensive Duelist is there's nothing to fix. It's just a good feat. The interesting thing about Defensive Duelist is it says while you're holding a finesse weapon, it doesn't say you have to be using it as a finesse weapon. What I mean by that is finesse weapons give you the option to use your dexterity mod instead of your strength mod for attack and damage rolls. You don't have to. You theoretically can be a strong... You can use a finesse weapon with strength, and it doesn't break anything. Because the prereq for this is only a dexterity of 13, which is not a massively high dex, and even strength-based characters, unless you are going to be in heavy armor, will probably have at least a 12 or a 13, maybe even a 14 in your dex to get a little bonus to your armor class. This just means you want to have a finesse weapon somewhere on you to give you a bonus to your armor class. And again, proficiency bonus at 4th level is +2, but at 5th level, the very next level turns to +3, and it just gets better from there. And a +3 to your AC is big. But when you get up to 17th level and it's at +6 to your AC, it only works against one attack. But that can be really, really nice, especially if you have other things that make you hard to hit, like maybe the blur spell, or if you're a monk, if you have patient defense where they're having disadvantage. Well, eventually they're going to still hit you even with the disadvantage, and at that point you just go, oh, did I tell you my AC was 18? I'm sorry. I meant 24. So it's Defensive Duelist is just a useful feat, and there's no need to change it. It's just fun. And I used it a ton as a monk, despite the fact that my monk had a ton of different ways to use the reaction. They could the two things that they used it most often were catching arrows and Defensive Duelist, but he's using it always. And it also meant, because Defensive Duelist only works against melee attacks, so giving Defensive Duelist to a monk meant nothing could hit me if I didn't want it to, and I had a reaction. Oh, you're going to shoot me with an arrow? Ting! Did you want it back? Key point. It was super fun. Moving on. Stop. Sorry, sometimes I argue with my body because it likes to argue with me. The next feat's Dual Wielder. And this is where things change massively. Prereq, proficiency with any martial weapon, repeatable, no. Ability score, increase strength or dex score by 1. Now, this is something that's kind of interesting. Earlier version of like dual wielder feats and things like that, specifically in 3rd edition, required you to have a high dex score. Specifically, I think just the dual wielder feat required a dex of 15. So dual wielding was almost exclusively something for dex-based characters, which was really, really interesting because in 3rd edition, in order to use your dexterity for the attack roll, you had to take another feat called Weapon Finesse. And it still didn't allow you to use your dexterity for the damage rolls. So even if you were a dex-based character like a dual-wielding ranger, you still had to have a decent strength score so that you could have something to add damage to your attacks. Because even with the highest dex score you would hit a lot, but strength was still what did damage. It's one of the things that annoyed me about 3rd edition is that dual wielding in general was super, super hard. So anyway, dual wielder in 1 D&D. Enhanced dual wielding, when you are holding a weapon with a light property in one hand, you can treat a non-light weapon in your other hand as if it had the light property, provided that weapon lacks the two-handed property. Then quick draw, you can draw or stow 2 weapons that lack the two-handed property when you would normally be able to draw or stow only 1. This seems to contradict with this playtest, specifically the quick draw. Again, it seems to me that they were changing. I talked about it in the last video. They used the word you can equip a weapon as part of the attack action instead of you can draw or stow. So now quick draw talks about drawing and stowing again. I'm not sure if the equip thing was just something weird that they were trying there that they didn't try here, or if draw and stow are going to be a thing and equip is a completely different thing. Again, we don't know because we have nothing else to reference it other than they used equip over here and they used draw and stow over here. Again, tip for people that want to homebrew or create your own tabletop stuff. If you mean the same thing, use the same words. Anytime you change words, even if they effectively mean the same thing, people are going to assume that you mean something different. And I found the perfect example of it as well. There is a Reddit post on r/D&D that said, or it might not have been r/D&D, but it was reposted r/D&D. But it was basically, I think the title was something to the effect of, you may have been playing Rakshasas all wrong. And what it was Rakshasas have this ability, they're effectively immune to spells lower than 6th level. And it makes them really, really formidable enemies to fight for spellcasters in general, because it means that the vast amount of your kit levels, your cantrips and all the way up to level 5 spells are worthless. Even if you have 6th, 7th, and 8th levels of spells, you have significantly less of those than you do of 5th through 1st in cantrips. So this person claimed that because they said in the description of limited magic immunity, because they said a Rakshasa cannot be affected by, and somewhere else in a different description they said, I think it was dragons or something, this creature is immune to spells of this level or something. That meant that Rakshasas can be hurt by spells lower than 5th level as long as they aren't the target, as long as the effect of the spell isn't hitting them. So you can't hit them with a fireball, but if you cast Holy Weapon on yourself where you do extra damage every time you hit, that still works. Or if you use the Shillelagh, because the Shillelagh is being cast on the stick, you could still hit them and do damage with the Shillelagh spell because they're not being affected by the spell. They're being affected by whatever the spell affected. So that means that you could. This guy, I'm kid you not, wrote this entire like thesis on this, and then all the comments were, dude, you are so wrong, and this is the most rules lawyery bullshit I've ever seen. He's like, I'm not trying to be a rules lawyer. I'm just saying this makes Rakshasas more interesting. He's like, no, it doesn't. Rakshasas were built a specific way. They're supposed to be a terror for spellcasters in general. And there are lots of ways to get around that spell resistance. But no, it doesn't. No. And so people just argued. And he would not give up. So I now will use that forever as an example of if you change the words but you mean the same thing, people are going to assume that it has to mean something different because it was supposed to be the same. Then you would have used the exact same wording. So anytime you write something in a tabletop RPG, if you have two different abilities or two different classes or two different sections of a book that tell you about something and you want them the effect to be the same effect, use the same wording. Because anytime you change wording, people will use that change to try and say, well, no, this is supposed to act differently, so it can't work exactly like that. Otherwise, they use the same words. So that being said, the enhanced dual wielding, I talked about it when I talked about the change to 2-weapon fighting. Because of how this is worded for dual wielder, it means it is not possible to dual wield rapiers. It is not possible to dual wield longswords. You can only pair a smaller weapon with a larger weapon. You can never pair two longer weapons together. Which again, the historic weapons experts will tell you that was the only way anyone ever dual wielded. You always used a smaller weapon in your offhand. And again, I've already watched my last video. I go on a huge long rant about it. That's never been true. There were tons and tons of examples of people using two of the exact same weapons in both hands and being incredibly effective. They used it in battle, actually on the battlefield in war. It was used in addition to being used in duels and things like that, where it was only one-on-one. Like it was a thing. Stop trying to say it wasn't. I'm also not saying that using a long weapon and a short weapon combined that was also a thing. I'm just saying that wasn't the only thing. So yeah, I'm not a fan of the dual wielder feat. I think it imposes a limitation that I don't think needs to be there. But again, with the changes of how they made 2-weapon fighting, again, what it looks like is they're trying to take away bonus actions being as useful as they are. Bonus actions can change 5th edition. We've talked about how action economy is so important. Whichever side has more actions they can do always has an advantage. And bonus actions were a really quick and easy way to give your side a bonus, because a lot of monsters don't have a use for a bonus action. They might have multi-attack and things like that, but they don't have a use for their bonus action. So just by having things that your characters could do with their bonus action, you were going to be giving your side an incredible advantage. And from what I've read so far, looking at the dual wielder feat, looking at the new light weapon property, looking at how they changed the bard, they are massively taking away the number of things that you can use your bonus action for. And I'm not sure why. I'm wondering if they're trying to make bonus actions something that only spellcasters use, which I think would be remarkably stupid. But because spellcasters already have an advantage over martial classes because magic is super powerful. So I would almost prefer to see bonus actions getting more use in martial classes and less use in casting classes to give martial classes something special. And yeah, overall, not a fan of the dual wielder. Again, mechanically, it's effectively the same thing as the dual wielder feat in 5th edition. The big difference being in 5th edition, you can dual wield longswords. In 1D&D, you can't. And I'm not a fan. I think, and again, I can understand if there was some really big problem that they needed to solve. Because a lot of the times when you see changes in here, they're solving a problem, like Crossbow Expert. The problem with Crossbow Expert is people that used crossbows didn't use it. Most people, first of all, didn't use crossbows in 5th edition. Short bows and longbows were just better because they didn't have the loading property. You didn't have to take Crossbow Expert. The people that used Crossbow Expert were spellcasters, so they could do point-blank spellcasting. So that's where they changed Crossbow Expert. Dual Wielder, there wasn't a problem with it. Like, a lot of number crunchers said that dual wielding in general in 5th edition was always a bad idea, and it was always better to wield a two-handed weapon instead of dual wielding. It wasn't true. It never has been true. But dual wielding in 5th edition, while it was easier, it was a lot better than 4th edition, where it was almost non-existent, and it was a lot better than 3rd edition. It still didn't feel great, because a lot of the times, like with a ranger dual wielding, you had to choose whether you were going to make your offhand attack with your weapon or you were going to use your hunter's mark. Or if you were a Beastmaster Ranger, you had to choose between if you wanted to be a melee Beastmaster, which is a cool thing. Like, that's what Drizzt is. He's a melee Beastmaster Ranger. You would have to choose between making your offhand attack and letting your Beast Companion attack. And so I like that aspect in the idea that now you can use your bonus action to do other things. You still get to do your dual wielding cool stuff. Something about this just seems weird, and until we see an equipment list or something, this whole thing just feels really weird. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. The next feat is durable. Prereqs con 13, repeatable no, increase your con by 1. You get Defy Death. You have advantage on death saving throws. Super useful. And then Speedy Recovery. As a bonus action, here's where we start adding bonus actions in. You can expend one of your hit dice, roll the die, and regain a number of hit points equal to the roll. So, Durable Feat exists in 5th edition. It is an almost worthless feat. Durable, increased con score by 1. So again, if you had a 15 con, you wanted to turn it into 16, this wasn't a bad one. There weren't a ton of feats that gave you increases to Constitution, so this was one of them. And then when you roll a hit die to regain hit points, the minimum number of hit points you regain from the roll equals twice your Constitution modifier. So it effectively meant if you rolled like a 1 or a 2 on your die, you weren't getting completely screwed when you rolled your hit die to regain hit points. It wasn't that useful. First of all, not a whole lot of people used hit dice to heal in 5th edition. Like short rests, most people that use short rests use them to regain things like monks and Battlemaster fighters got stuff back after short rests. And I know a lot of people that play a lot of 5th edition D&D when they would take a short rest and go, oh wait, yeah, we can heal. Like, people just didn't use it that much. And so, no, but I don't think I've ever seen a single player use the durable feat in any game I've ever played, or any game I've ever run. This is so much better. There is not a bad thing about this. Advantage on death saves. That's super good. Death saves are 10 or higher, you win, and it's a Constitution save. So if you already have a Constitution of at least 13, this will turn it into a Constitution of at least 14, because you have to start at 13 and then you get a +1. So to take the durable feat, you will, by the time you take it, you will have at least a +2. That means on an 8 or higher, you make your death save, and now you have advantage on them. This is really nice. And then you have a bonus action self-heal, and it's significantly better than any heal in the game currently. What I mean by that is the only bonus action heal that currently exists in 5th edition is Healing Word, which is a D4 plus casting modifier, which really isn't that much depending on your class. If you're playing like a wizard where you only have a D8 The Wizards have D8s or D6s? They used to have D4s. That was hilarious. Because wizards, like, you could sneeze wrong and kill a wizard. At low level, like, it sucked, but it was funny. Yeah, they do have a D6. They used to have a D4. So if you're a wizard, a D4 plus a bonus is going to be useful. But if you're a barbarian, this is doing nothing for you. It really isn't. Even like paladins and fighters with their D10s, it's not. But being able to use a bonus action to burn a hit die, which is, again, based on your class, so it's going to be more powerful than any other heal. Like, that is super, super useful. And again, it's action economy manipulation. Now, now you don't even have to worry about the 2-weapon fighting stuff. Now you can use your bonus action to heal, and as long as you have hit dice, you have a free heal. Now, again, it's not going to out-heal the enemy, but it's going to be useful. And doing it a couple turns in a row, especially if at least on one of those turns you don't get hit, you can probably keep yourself going a lot longer. And again, they're taking away all your other uses for bonus actions. So, like, this is a really good feat. I like it. Even with current 5th edition rules, this I think would be really interesting to playtest, just because I'd like to see how much of a difference using your bonus action to self-heal becomes. Because even with fighters, I believe, before I say the wrong thing, fighting style, second wind. Oh no, second wind is a bonus action. So second wind is a bonus action, gives you a D10 plus your fighter level. So effectively, durable is kind of mimicking second wind, but it's going to be slightly less useful because you get less hit points. But second wind is a once per short or long rest. This is literally, there's no limitation to it. As long as you have hit dice, you can do this. So yeah, I think it's cool. I think it's really, really interesting. So, moving on. The next feat, Elemental Adept. 4th level, prereq, spellcasting or pact magic feature. Repeatable, yes, but you must choose a different damage type each time for energy mastery. Increase wisdom, charisma, increase intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by 1. And then energy mastery. Choose one of the following damage types: acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder. Spells you cast ignore resistance to damage of the chosen type. In addition, when you roll damage for a spell you cast that deals damage of that type, you can treat any 1 on the damage die as 2. It is exactly the same as the 5th edition version, and it is a really good thing. It does nothing for immunity. But if you are building a character, like one of my players has a thing with fire, and his character just burns everything, has all these fire spells. Elemental Adept, incredibly useful because resistance doesn't matter. They can always cast fire spells and never have to worry about them not doing the damage that they want, as long as the creature's not immune. As far as, and again, vulnerability in 5th edition is kind of a joke. Almost no creatures have vulnerability to anything. So sticking with just a single damage type is not nearly as limiting as it was in previous editions, where vulnerability was a much bigger thing, and changing up your damage type on certain creatures was almost essential. So, yeah, simple, easy, fun, useful. Moving on. Now we get into the epic boons. I don't know if I'm going to go over every single one of these, but it is nice. We do have to kind of talk about these epic boons. So, in the new version of classes, you get your kind of ultimate class ability for your class at level 18. Meaning you have 2 more levels that you get powerful that have nothing to do with your class. 19th level, you get a feat. 20th level, you get an epic boon. As I mentioned before, epic boons already exist in 5th edition. They're meant to be bonuses after you hit level 20 if people want to continue playing. or really special things if your characters do some really amazing role-playing moment and you want to give them some sort of mechanical benefit. Again, one of the strengths of 5th edition is just how special your class is. And what I mean by that is all of the cool things about your character. Yeah, you might get a really cool like animated shield that can float around, and that might be a cool aspect to your character. But almost all the cool things you're going to do with your character are going to be based on the features you get from your class and your subclass in 5th edition. And I like that. In 4th edition, it wasn't like that. There was tons of super, super cool stuff that you got from your class. 4th edition is absolutely an experience to play. It is a spectacle. But you got equally cool shit from the magic items. Like some of the just crazy nonsense magic items you could get. Like one of them, it was called a needle gun or something like that. It was a shotgun that artificers could use as their casting focus. Like, it was super, super cool, and it came with an at-will ability so that, you know, if someone was too close to you, you could just shotgun and shoot everyone in a cone. Like, it was super, super cool. 5th edition, we have cool magic items, but again, the magic items were never meant to be the intrinsic part of your character. They're meant to be cool extra things. The cool stuff of your character should be in the class. And like I said before, it seems like they're trying to shift away from the class being the most important thing and shift it into, well, your feats are going to be more important to how your character plays than your class. And now they're even going as far as to saying, yeah, for high-level play, tier 4 starts at 17. So when you get to tier 4, you only gain 1 level in tier 4 where your class gets any stronger. Everything else is a feat or a boon. And yeah, it feels like a step in the wrong direction. And everybody that I have, every article and every video I have watched or read about this particular playtest material has been massively against the idea of at 20th level you get an epic boon. They want 20th level to be specific to the class. Now, the epic boons themselves, they're a little bit different than the rest of the feats. The epic boons are, their prereqs are not levels. Their prereqs are a group. So like the epic boon of combat prowess, your prereq is the expert or warrior group. So they do limit them slightly to where the pool of epic boons available to you are going to be different based on the class group that your class belongs to. But it still means paladins, fighters, and barbarians and monks all get access to the same epic boons. Despite the fact that monks, barbarians, fighters, and paladins are massively different classes. And paladins tend to have more in common with clerics than they do with fighters. Because of their divine heritage. From role-playing perspectives, paladins are a lot closer to clerics than they are to fighters. So I'm not particularly fond of it. I'll go through a couple of them. Like the epic boon of combat prowess is the first one listed. When you miss with a melee attack, you can hit instead. Once you use this benefit, you can't use it again until you roll initiative. This is something that is extremely common in the epic boons, is you can't use it again until you roll initiative. I'm not a fan of until you roll initiative because of two things. One, it means if there is an out-of-combat use of an ability, and there's a couple, like Epic Boon of Luck, which is exclusive to the expert group. As immediately after you roll a d20 for a d20 test, you can roll a d10 and add the number rolled to the test. Very useful. Once you use this benefit, you can't use it again until you roll initiative or finish a short or long rest. Epic Boon of Luck has a ton of out-of-combat uses. Like, yes, you make a lot of rolls in combat, But for the expert group, if you're playing a rogue, you're not getting extra attack. And most bards are not getting extra attack. So 9 times out of 10, they're only making 1 attack roll on their turn, if that. Bards may be casting spells the entire time and not making any attack roll or making any d20 tests, and maybe the enemy's making it. So Epic Boon of Luck doesn't really help them that much, but outside of combat, when you're using your skills, that actually is rather beneficial. And having to go into combat just so you can get your Boon of Luck back, if you're using it primarily outside of combat, feels wrong. The other problem with Until You Roll Initiative, I use initiative in my game a lot for things other than combat. If we're doing a particular, I call them skills challenges because I brought them over from 4th edition, which is where they originated. But if the players are negotiating together, I may have them roll initiative, not because I want them to go in order, but because it gives me a really simple way to know who has already done something before I let somebody else do something again. I've used it a lot in conversations. I'll go, why don't you guys just go ahead and roll initiative? We're not in combat, but we're going to be in initiative simply because it gives me an order to ask you, okay, what do you want to ask or what do you want to do? I use it in like chase scenes and things like that. Or if we're in a dungeon or something that's full of traps and that, I may have them roll initiative just so I know one by one where they go and where they are if a certain trap goes off. None of these are full combat encounters or anything like that. And I might leave that initiative order for most of the dungeon until they walk into combat. So basing something off of every single time you roll initiative, you get this ability back, is going to incentivize DMs to not use initiative for anything other than combat, and to avoid allowing players to, I guess, effectively pick fights. Because something, and I've mentioned this before when we've talked about things where you get a resource back when you roll initiative. Because a few capstone abilities on classes, like the monk capstone ability, says if you have 0 key and you roll initiative, you get 4 key. It has to have that if you have 0, because otherwise players will pick fights with, chipmunks and go, oh, I'm going to pick a fight with this gun. Let's roll for initiative because it's combat. And then they will just keep picking fights and rolling initiative so that they can basically recharge a limited resource. So yeah, I'm not a fan. They use this constantly in the Epic Boons, is until you roll initiative, until you roll initiative. It feels like they're trying to bring back, in 4th edition, there was these things called encounter powers. They were really fun, but you only use them once per encounter, and an encounter was a period of time. Technically, you got your encounter powers back after a short rest, but a short rest was 5 minutes in D&D 4th edition. So it feels like they're trying to bring back encounter powers, and the thing with encounter powers was, encounter powers, you generally wanted to make sure you were using all of your encounter powers every encounter, because you would always get them back. Daily powers, you were much more reserved with. But encounter powers, you would use every combat. And because of that, when you got to like tier 2 and tier 3, the Paragon tier and Epic tier, instead of just gaining new powers, you would replace low-level powers with high-level powers, just so you wouldn't have 72 different powers available to you. You would just have more powerful... and they weren't like, oh, we upgrade this to the next thing. No, they were new powers, but they were always going to be more useful than the ones you got at low levels. So it was a really cool thing. And it feels kind of like that's what they're trying to do with these Epic Boons. Because this roll initiative thing, I don't remember it being that big a thing in 5th edition. If I'm 100% wrong, let me know in the comments down below. Which I know you guys will. Anyways. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this roll initiative thing. Trying to see, like, some of the other things, like Epic Boon of Dimensional Travel. You have to be an expert or mage. you can cast the Misty Step spell without expending a spell slot. That is, and then you can't use it again until you roll initiative or finish a short or long rest. Other than the roll initiative thing, that's the Eladrin racial trait. Right there, the old Eladrin racial trait, and it really wasn't that great. Adding in the roll initiative, that actually kind of turns it into the 4th edition Eladrin racial trait. And 4th edition was... Almost all of my characters were Eladrin in 4th edition because I loved... They had an encounter power called Misty Step. So every encounter, they could teleport, I think it was 5 squares, so 25 feet. Every encounter, they could do it. They just needed 5 minutes of rest, and they could do it again. I used it constantly. I loved being able to teleport. And certain classes would get cool things, like the Sword Mage. You could Misty Step and then make a basic attack as a free action after you Misty Stepped, if you took a feat for it. And I loved it. So yeah, I mean, I kind of like that, but again, the roll initiative thing feels weird. Yeah. So overall, like I said, I'm not going to go through every single epic boon. If you guys are really, really interested in all the different epic boons and my ideas on how you can use them, let me know in the comments. I will make an epic boon video for this. But because of just how incredibly bad the reaction has been to epic boons, I do not see epic boons coming back. I do not think, at least as they are here, I do not think they are going to make it into the final product. And so doing this kind of deep dive style thing on every single one of them, I think is just a big waste of time. Some of them are interesting. Most of them, they're not as much fun as the old capstone abilities in any way, shape, or form. And the new capstone abilities that they've added are just not cool because you get them at 18th level and they kind of depowered them or kind of declawed a lot of them. And they're just not, they're not fun. So, yeah, not a fan of the epic boons. Moving on. The next group of feats are fighting styles. Fighting styles are now feats. Not a fan. They're exclusive to the warrior group. So like rangers can't get fighting styles anymore. Or at least can't take fighting style feats. I'm going to look because they have a ranger in here, and I actually like this version of the ranger. I thought they got a fighting style, but I might be wrong. Favorite enemy, spellcasting. Oh yeah, so they do have fighting style at 2nd level. So there are ways around these kind of limitations where they can specifically go, well, you normally wouldn't be able to do this unless you're a warrior, but we'll give you a special ability that lets you take a fighting style feat. Which again is another thing that's just really weird. Because why are they making feats when, again, the ranger gets it at 2nd level when you don't get feats? Like it feels like they're trying to standardize things by basically everything that classes might share, because every martial class, or almost every martial class, gets at least a minor group of fighting styles that they can choose from. Paladins get a fighting style, fighters get a fighting style, rangers get a fighting style, barbarians get a fighting style. Like fighting styles are a thing for martial classes. Because it's shared between all these classes, it feels like anything that is shared between multiple classes, they're trying to turn into a feat now. And I think that creates a lot more problems than it solves. Things like anyone in the warrior group, if they wanted to, they could take every fighting style. Whereas that used to be exclusive to fighters, and specifically, I think there was only maybe 1 or 2 fighters subclasses where you got an additional fighting style. Or they had a feat in Tasha's where you could choose a fighting style. So I guess maybe that's where they're getting this from. But yeah, it feels wrong. The fighting styles here, I don't need to go over them. They're the same fighting styles that are in the PHB. Archery, defense, dueling, great weapon fighting, protection, 2-weapon fighting. It's the same thing that have always been there, so we don't need to talk about them. But I'm not a fan of everything's a feat now. Not a fan. Moving on. The next feat, Grappler. Grappler exists in 5th edition. It fucking sucks. Like, the Grappler feat gets a lot more shit than it deserves. Like, people, right after I say it fucking sucks, people do give it a lot more shit than it deserves. It's not the worst feat ever. It's not a good one. And to be perfectly honest, it's a full feat in 5th edition, and it gives you 2 things. You have advantage on all attack rolls against creatures you're grappling, and then you can use your action to try to pin a creature grappled by you. To do so, make another grapple check. If you succeed, you and the creature are both restrained until the grapple ends. The second thing sucks. There's no benefit to restraining an enemy if you also have to be restrained. I understand mechanics-wise, if you're putting someone in a full Nelson, you are going to be limited in your ability to move as well. But it means, like, grappling, you can drag someone. As soon as you're both restrained, that means you both have a speed of 0. So you literally just get to lie on the floor. All attacks against you have advantage. All of your attacks have disadvantage, meaning since they're both grappled and restrained, you can make regular attacks against them, but against no one else. But the advantage on attack rolls against a creature you're grappling, if you built a grappling style character, that actually could be really useful. Because, again, grappling in 5th edition, you could actually replace one of your attacks with a grapple. So if you had multiple attacks, especially if you were a fighter, you could grapple as your first one. If you're a strength-based fighter, you're probably going to win. Or if you're a barbarian, grapple with your first attack, and then everything else you have advantage on. And they can't get away from you. Their speed is 0. If they want to break the grapple, it takes their action. Like, there were some advantages to the grappler, but you really had to build your character around it to get the benefit out of it. If we look at the 1 D&D version of the grappler, prereq, strength or dex plus 13, repeatable no. Ability score increase, strength or dex plus 1. Attack advantage. You have advantage on attack rolls against a creature grappled by you. Now, again, they changed how grappling works a little bit. Unarmed strikes, if you hit with an unarmed strike, you can auto grapple. So that's a new thing that I really like. That also means this attack advantage becomes more useful, because you can unarmed strike even if you're holding a weapon in each hand, because unarmed striking can be boom or boom. I think grappling still requires you to have a free hand, but if you have a 2-handed weapon, you can use one hand and then whap them with the other. So there's a lot of different ways that you can grapple in the new version. However, there's more aspects to this. You get Fast Wrestler. You aren't slowed when you move a creature grappled by you, provided that the creature is your size or smaller. So now you can move full speed when you're grappling, which is nice. And the slowed condition has other issues, or not issues. It provides other debuffs to you as well. So that is useful. It, again, means that a character with a grappler feat can play a little more of that controller style role. But my favorite one, punch and grab. When you hit a creature with an unarmed strike as part of the attack action on your turn, you can deal damage to the target and also grapple it. You can use this benefit only once per turn. Now you can auto grapple with a hit. Now you don't have to choose between doing damage and hitting. You just auto grapple with a hit. This means I can make my grapple monk. I think a grapple monk would be a really, really cool thing. The grappler feat here makes that a possibility. And with everything else, you could be a grapple monk that, like, grabs someone as they punch them and then drags them around the room and throws them, like, full-on judo style. Or if you... full-on Steven Seagal magic Aikido. For those of you that don't know, Aikido is a Japanese martial art. It's kind of based around small joint manipulation and things like that. Like, you do wrist grabs and wrist locks and stuff like that. If you watch Steven Seagal movies, he claims to be an Aikido master. My understanding is he actually is. He's actually studied Aikido in Japan under a master and has gained the title. And so if you watch him, he does all these things like throwing people around and all that, and it looks really, really cool. Practical use, Aikido is just not a really useful martial art when you're outside of the dojo. And I have my own theories as to why, but that is not my opinion. That is the opinion of everyone except Aikido practitioners who claim that it's the most powerful thing ever. But I actually, there's a dude on YouTube that that's actually a very skilled Aikido practitioner. And he decided to kind of prove how awesome Aikido was by sparring with a mixed martial artist. And he found out that Aikido just doesn't work. However, if you watch the Steven Seagal movie, he does all this really cool, like throwing people around by grabbing their hands and all that. So theoretically, if you wanted the kind of magic Aikido that doesn't exist, Grappler would let you do that. And I think that's cool. But yeah, anyway, moving on. It's another 2-hour video. Next feat, Great Weapon Master. This is the bane of low-level DMs. Fun fact. If you want to piss off a DM that is forcing you to play a character at first level, when you're like, can we just start at 3rd level so I already have my subclass? Like, no, we have to start from 1st level. This is the character you make. Choose human variant, barbarian, and for the feats, pick Great Weapon Master. Because you will one-shot every creature it throws at you. 100% of the time. It is the most overpowered thing. Or you can choose fighter or ranger and choose Sharpshooter. It's the exact same thing. Because the 5th edition version of Sharpshooter and Great Weapon Master both allow you to take a 5 from your attack roll to add 10 to your damage. It is massively, massively powerful. They have changed things in 1D&D. Prereqs. Proficiency with any martial weapon. Repeatable no. Ability score increase. Strength score by 1. So Great Weapon Master exclusive to strength. Cleave. They've brought it back, folks. Immediately after you score a critical hit with a melee weapon or reduce a creature to 0 hit points with 1, you can make 1 attack with the same weapon as a bonus action. So here's another bonus action. It's starting to feel like bonus action is effectively, you could effectively trade it or treat it as a feat action. It's looking like they're shifting. Things that you get in your class are going to be actions and reactions, and things you get with feats are going to be bonus actions, which again makes feats that much more powerful. So with this Great Weapon Master, score a critical hit with a melee weapon or reduce a creature to 0 hit points with 1, you make 1 attack with the same weapon as a bonus action. So I told you about Great Cleave. In Cleave, this is the 5th edition version of it. And again, it used to be broken. This one is a little bit better because it limits it to your bonus action. So Great Cleave, you could do it as many times as you wanted. And so it wrecked. It absolutely wrecked. I do like the fact that either score a critical hit or reduce a creature to 0 hit points. In the way Cleave worked in 3rd edition was you had to reduce a creature to 0 hit points. So it was really, really effective if you got like a swarm of kobolds coming at you. It was useless to anything that could survive 1 hit. So a lot of times if you were a barbarian if you were doing a Great Cleave build, you would get whatever weapon could do the largest single hit damage. Even if it screwed up a bunch of other things, you had everything you could do so that a single hit would do a lot of damage, and then you would just cleave through things. This is a 5th edition version. I think is a little better. The other thing, Heavy Weapon Mastery. When you hit a creature with a heavy weapon, as part of the attack action on your turn, you can cause the weapon to deal extra damage to the target. The extra damage equals your proficiency bonus. You can deal it only once per turn. This is a massive change. Again, old Great Weapon Master. Great Weapon Master strikes were -5 to the attack roll, +10 to the damage roll. And you could do it as long as you were using a heavy weapon. So that meant most classes could do it twice per turn. Fighters could do it 3 or 4 times per turn because they get extra attacks. it was game breaking. Sharpshooter was the same way. I have a thrown weapon wielding Battlemaster fighter that gets 3 attacks, and I can't remember who it was we were fighting. I think they were Devil Dogs or something like that. Hellhounds, there we go. We were fighting Hellhounds, and one of them came up and was about to breathe on us, and we were in a very small room, so we were all about to get torched. And it was my turn, and I just went, phew, 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 3 sharpshooter shots, 3 hits, and I did, I have a 20 dex, so I was using the equivalent of darts. So it was a d4 plus 5 for each one, and then plus 30 because all 3 were sharpshooter shots. So just the extra damage. Ignore the 1d4 from the darts, because did almost nothing. I did 45 damage plus 3d4. I killed the Hellhound before it could do anything. And because I'd been added into the campaign late, and this was the first time my character had attacked anything, everyone else at the table, or call rather, I just went, wait a minute, what did you do? Like, because I flavored it as he throws cards. So I just killed a Hellhound with playing cards. And the next time I went up, as we had one of the characters in the door, kind of blocking it and being his big tanky self, I'm sitting there like, I have a deck of cards. I have a deck of cards when we play this game that I shuffle and stuff while I'm playing the character. And so I'm sitting there and I'm just like bringing cards up and I'm telling a story. It's like, oh, this queen came up and she was doing this and that, and then she did this, and because he has a kind of a Mancunian accent. And so I'm doing this and I'm telling this story. It's like, oh, you always got to keep your queen, keep her happy. Because otherwise the jack's going to come up. And I'm just doing this and I'm having a blast. And they're going, how did you build this? I'm like, I cleared it with the DM, but I build weird characters. And yeah, I made Gambit with a with a Mancunian accent. So anyway, new version, they got rid of it because, again, a lot of DMs really hate that. I don't. I've had quite a few of my players that use ranged attack use Sharpshooter. Sharpshooter is extremely common. In the Adventures League, if you were using a ranged weapon, you had Sharpshooter. You just always did. So I didn't have a huge problem with it, but I definitely think this is a little bit better. And I think it's a little more fun. The fact that you get to cleave and you actually get to play differently as opposed to just bigger number make things better. I like that better. So, yeah, moving on. Never going to finish this video. I guess they're splitting these things up. The classes will be faster, I promise. Next feat, heavily armored. Prereq, medium armor training. Increase counter strength score by 1. You get training in heavy armor. Really simple. Heavy Armor Master. Prereq, heavy armor training. Increase counter strength by 1, and then damage reduction. When you're hit by an attack while wearing heavy armor, any bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage dealt to you by that attack is reduced by an amount equal to your proficiency bonus. So, cool thing about this, heavily armored already exists. It's how you get how you can wear heavy armor if you're not trained in it. Super easy. Heavy Armor Master also exists in 5th edition, but in that, I believe all it is you reduce it by 3, which, don't get me wrong, 3 is still useful, and it's actually a really useful ability if you are wearing heavy armor, because it effectively it can stack with resistance, which is nice, and it means that every time you get hit, you're taking off a number, which means if as you get higher and higher levels, monsters that do physical attacks and weapon-based attacks don't generally get significantly stronger attacks. They do get a little bit stronger, but their benefit is they get multiple attacks. You, when you get to tier 2, every creature is going to have at least 2 attacks. some of them start getting 3. When you get to tier 3, everything has 3 attacks. Some of them start getting 4. When you get to tier 4, everything, if it's making an attack, it has 4 attacks. And some get 5 or 6 then. And so the more attacks you take, the better this is. Because if you just take a single attack at, 17th level, you're reducing 6 points of damage. But if you take 4 attacks, you've just reduced the amount of damage you took by 24. So in 5th edition, the feat was useful, but just the flat 3 meant at lower levels it was really useful, and at higher levels it really wasn't. Tying it to your proficiency bonus means it's always useful. Taking it at level 4 is just as effective at taking it at level 19. You're going to have a benefit either way. So, moving on. Next up, Inspiring Leader. Prereq, Wisdom and Charisma 13, repeatable no. Increase your Wisdom and Charisma score by 1, and then Encouraging Performance. At the end of a short rest or a long rest, you have an Inspiring Performance. When you do so, choose up to 6 friendly creatures, which can include yourself, within 30 feet. Chosen creatures each gain temporary hit points equal to 2d4 plus your proficiency bonus. This is another one that I think is often underutilized. Inspiring Leader, again, is another feat that already exists in 5th edition. But in 5th edition, it's temporary hit points equal to your level plus your charisma modifier. This one is 2d4 plus your proficiency bonus. Technically, at lower levels, Encouraging Performance is better in 1 D&D. At higher levels, it's better in 5th edition. But other than that, it's almost identical. And they are useful. I also think... So the other thing that's kind of interesting about Inspired Leader is it's just you spend 10 minutes inspiring your companions, whereas here, it has to be at the end of a short or a long rest. So technically, they nerfed Inspiring Leader, which I don't understand why they would do that. The 5th edition version is still... I would never consider it overpowered at all. Temporary hit points are always useful. Temporary hit points are always useful. But tying it to short or long rests, again, makes it significantly less useful, whereas the other one, it was just 10 minutes. And I don't think I've ever heard of anyone abusing... Because again, they're always useful. They're not game-breaking. Especially not the amount that you're getting. It's going to cushion a hit. Which is nice, but I don't see why... and again, 10 minutes is 10 minutes. And you're performing during that. So it's not like you can do, you guys are sitting, getting ready to ambush Strahd, and then the leader goes, oh, wait a minute, guys, let me give you a 10-minute speech. No, that's not going to work. In 10 minutes, Strahd is probably going to be off boinking somebody. Or he's going to hear you going, giving the St. Crispin's Day speech. So, yeah, not a huge fan of the new version of Inspiring Leader. If they get rid of the short or long rest and turn it back into 10 minutes, I would be okay with it. I'm also okay with how it works in 5th edition. I think it's just it's a useful feat. So yeah, moving on. Keen Mind is next, and this is the first of the 3 feats that deal with those new actions for making skill checks. We can cover all of them right here just to make things faster. Prereq for Keen Mind is Intelligence 13, repeatable no. The other ones, just so we can get through them really quickly. Observant is the wisdom-based one. That takes Intelligence or Wisdom 13. And then the last one is... What is it called? I thought there was one more. Sharpshooter, Resilient. Did I miss it? Anyway, so what this does, increase your intelligence score by 1 for Keen Mind. Increase your intelligence score by 1 to a maximum of 20. Choose one of the following skills: Arcana, History, Investigation, Nature, or Religion. If you lack proficiency in the chosen skill, you gain proficiency in it. If you have proficiency in it, you gain expertise. So it's a way to get expertise. And if you're using it to gain proficiency in the skill, you're probably using it wrong. You should be using it for expertise. And then quick study, you can take the study action as a bonus action. So remember, I talked before, by kind of classifying that no, these all take actions, that means that we can make exceptions later on, and one of those exceptions is built into Keen Mind. Keen Mind means you can take the study action as a bonus action. Now, I think Keen Mind was, it is a it is a feat, and it's another one that some DMs complain about, specifically because the last thing that it gives you is you can accurately recall anything you have seen or heard within the past month. This was the I don't have to take notes, that's the DM's job feat. For players that didn't like taking notes, they would go, well, I don't remember, but my player does, so what is it? And it would annoy quite a few DMs. So they got rid of that. And now it's just you can take the study action as a bonus action, which I think is interesting. Again, this is another thing where a feat is giving you a bonus action ability. So again, it's looking more and more like bonus actions could almost be called feat actions. But yeah, I'm not really against it. If we look at Observant, again, the prereqs are Intelligence or Wisdom, but choose one of the following skills: Insight, Investigation, or Perception. Lack proficiency, you get the skill, otherwise you get expertise. Then Quick Search, you can take the search action as a bonus action. So Keen Mind is Study, Observant is Search. Again, Observant exists in D&D already. And Observant was another one that I really liked, because it gave you the ability to read lips, which was fun. And then you get a +5 bonus to passive perception and passive investigation. No one ever used passive investigation. But passive perception was a really big deal, because that was how you... that was what you rolled against for stealth. So if creatures were sneaking up on the party... I know a lot of players that would take Observant just to get a crazy high passive perception and never be surprised. So this gets rid of that passive perception bonus, which again, I know a lot of DMs hated. I didn't, because there were other things you could do to get around that. But it was one of the min-maxer things, and now it's you can take the search action as a bonus action. I don't know how useful that's going to be, because again, most of the time when you use these abilities, you use them out of combat, so it doesn't matter if it's a bonus action or just an action. So I'll have to see someone actually use this to see if it's actually useful. And if I figure out what the last one was, I thought there was one more. Maybe it's only 2. Anyway, let's move on, because I don't want to be doing this for 7 years, and it's already over 2 hours. Ho, 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 ho. This is going to be a long one, folks. I apologize. The next feat, lightly armored. No prereqs. You get the following armor training: light armor, medium armor, and shield. I do find it interesting. In 5th edition, there was 2 different feats. There was a light armor feat, and then there was a medium armor feat. And now they just put it into both. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I don't know anyone that uses medium armor in 5th edition, because there are so few instances where medium armor is ever going to be better than light armor. Because medium armor all limits your ability. You can only add a +2 from your dexterity. So unless your character only has a 14 dexterity, which again, 9 times out of 10, if you're... 9 times out of 10, if you're using any kind of armor, you're probably going to have some sort of dexterity-based thing. Like, if you're using armor, more likely than not, you are a melee class. And if you're a melee class, you're either strength or dexterity-based. If you're a strength-based character, you're using heavy armor. If you're a dex-based character, you're using light armor. I don't know anyone that uses medium armor. So now, kind of just lumping in medium armor with the lightly armored trait or feat, I guess kind of makes sense. I don't know. Oh, wow. And this is the only feat I have seen thus far that doesn't increase an ability score. Wow, that's an interesting one. It is a first level feat, though. So maybe that's what it is because it's a first level feat, it doesn't increase something. Anyway, moving on. I'm going to drink real quick. Next one is Mage Slayer. Mage Slayer is another one that in 5th edition it exists. Not a lot of people use it. And that's one where your mileage will vary. If you are not facing spellcasters, Mage Slayer is a pointless feat. Or if you only face them every so often, it feels really bad where the only time you get to use one of your feats, which should massively change how you play your character, is the once in a blue moon where you fight a spellcaster. I mean, running spellcasters in D&D 5th edition wasn't fun for a long time anyways. The new Monsters of the Multiverse version of spellcasters are a little bit easier. But the Mage Slayer in 1 D&D, ability score increase strength or dex by 1. Oh, and prereq proficiency with any martial weapon. And then you get concentration breaker. When you damage a creature that is concentrating, it is disadvantage on the saving throw it makes to maintain concentration. Again, just like before. And then guarded mind. If you fail an intelligence, wisdom, or charisma saving throw, you can cause yourself to succeed instead. Once you use this benefit, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. You effectively get a legendary resistance, which I think is really cool. And it does feel like something a Mage Slayer, like if you were to build a character whose entire purpose was I kill mages and magic users, that makes sense to give them something where even if I screw up, I'm going to be able to succeed in this long enough to get to them and beat the shit out of them. And a lot of times, just having your Mage Slayer succeed when the rest of your party fails means they can go up, and a lot of those things are going to be concentration effects, so they can go up and break the concentration. So yeah, again, it's something that you really have to kind of build your character around, and it needs to kind of be relevant to the story. But I think Mage Slayer in 1 D&D is actually better than the Mage Slayer in 5th edition, which I thought was a decent feat. Again, it had limited use compared to some of the other ones, but it was still useful. And I think this makes it better. So, moving on. Medium Armor Master. They have this as well. When you're wearing medium armor, you can add 3 rather than 2 to your AC if you have a dexterity score of 16 or higher. This makes medium armor slightly better. Still, I don't know I've never seen a character wear medium armor. They either wear heavy or light. I've never seen them wear medium. If you have a character that you wear medium armor in, let me know in the comments down below. I want to know why. Because again, medium armor is not significantly, like it is generally for the equivalent light armor, you're increasing your AC by 1. So with the fact that you can only have a +2 with your dex in medium armor, or this gives it a +3, and any other one you can technically have up to a +5, light armor is always better. So let me know in the comments if you've actually played with a medium armor character. Moving on. Mounted combat. Prereq, proficiency with any martial weapon. I do find it interesting that you don't have to have proficiency with a horse or something, but whatever. Ability score increase strength, dex, or wisdom by 1. Mount handler, you have advantage on wisdom checks, animal handling, made to handle or train horses and other beasts employed as mounts. While mounted, you have advantage on attack rolls against any creature that's within 5 feet of your mount. Leap aside, if your mount is subjected to an effect that allows it to make a dex save, to take only half damage, it takes no damage, it's basically evasion. And then veer while mounted, you can use your reaction to force an attack that hits your mount to hit you instead. Again, mounted combat exists in 5th edition, and it's really similar. Yeah, it's almost identical. The big difference being the advantage on animal handling. Everything else is identical. And I have the same problem with it. I have never played in. I have never read an adventure for the Adventures League. I've never run an adventure at any of the conventions I did. None of the DMs that ran adventures for me for the Adventures League ever had anyone use the mounted combatant feat, because there was never anyone that was ever mounted during combat. Ever. I don't think I've ever seen it happen. So as much as, yes, if you were playing like a knight style character, this could be really cool. You could use a lance, which basically requires you to be on horseback, and do something really cool. But horses can't go downstairs, so you can't dungeon dive with them. Horses make you taller, so they generally can't go indoors at all, because your head will be, hitting chandeliers and other things like that. There's a lot of places you can't take your horse. So it just makes it really, really, really not useful, just because there's so many situations, and the majority of time you're in combat, you're not in a place that you can use your horse. So, yeah. Moving on. Next feat is Polearm Master. Prereqs, versus with any martial weapon, repeatable no. Ability score increase, strength score by 1. It is effectively identical to the 5th edition version. Immediately after you take the attack action and attack with a weapon that has the heavy and reach properties, you can use a bonus action to make a melee weapon attack. This weapon's damage die for the attack is a d4, and it deals bludgeoning damage. It's identical. The only difference is, instead of listing the weapons you can use, it just says weapons that have the heavy and reach properties, which is the same list of weapons. So, or actually, I think Polearm Master... I want to check real quick. Glaive, halberd, pike, quarterstaff, or spear. So, the Polearm Master for 5th edition, you actually could use the quarterstaff or spear to make attacks, whereas in this one it's just glaive, halberd, pike, and or glaive, halberd, and pike, effectively. Yeah, they limit it even more. Spear gets kind of shit on real bad in D&D in general, which sucks, because spears were spears were incredibly effective weapons in medievals. Pikes were as well, don't get me wrong. The difference between a pike and a spear, for anyone that doesn't know, a spear is something that you can use one-handed. Normally you can use it two-handed as well. A pike is anything large enough that is not possible to wield one-handed at all. So a really, really common fighting style, going all the way back to Greek hoplites, was shield and spear. It was incredibly good. And despite the fact that the spear is not a quote-unquote reach weapon, because you could hold a spear in the middle, you could hold it in the end, you could place your hand anywhere you wanted. A spear is an incredibly versatile weapon, and it could extend your reach significantly longer than any sword you could have. So spear's been done dirty in 5th edition, and Polearm Master really ain't doing it any favors. The other part of it, while you're holding a weapon that has a heavy and reach property, use your reaction to make one melee attack against a creature that enters the reach you have of the weapon. So that's the other thing. Again, Polearm Master and the Sentinel feat used to be like the min-maxer's dream, because what they would do is they would get Polearm Master and then they get Sentinel. Sentinel means if you hit with an opportunity attack, their speed's reduced to 0. So as soon as they get close to you, you poke them, and then they couldn't actually come and attack you. You can still do that in this, but otherwise, yeah, Polearm Master is a decently useful feat. It always has been. It's always going to be. I just hate the fact that they limit it to... This effectively is just 3 weapons. Glaive, halberd, pike. So I'd like to see... Again, I want to see the spear get a little bit more love. And I'd like to see the quarterstaff get a little bit more love. Again, one of the weapons I trained with was bowstaff, which is different than the quarterstaff. Quarterstaff is literally only about this big. Bowstaff, like my bowstaff, is it's at least 6 feet. I can't remember if it's taller than me. No, I think it's just 6 feet. So it comes up to like here on me. Maybe it's a little taller than that. Anyway, Anyway, so bow staves in general are going to at least be as tall as you are. If you look at a lot of like Shaolin bow work, they will use staves that are taller than them. So the staff that most people think of like monks using is not a quarter staff. A quarter staff is this big. But they don't like they use the term quarterstaff and kind of fighting staff or bow staff interchangeably in 5th edition because monks can use quarterstaffs. And again, as much as it is a two-handed weapon, you can strike very fast with a staff because you can use both ends, and it is in your best interest to do that. In addition to constantly changing where you are placing your hands. One of the key aspects of staff work in general is kind of changing where you hold the staff when you swing. So judging distance as far as for your opponent, judging distance is really, really difficult because you can make the same swinging motion and just move your hand on the staff a little bit, and your opponent will get hit by an attack that they were missed by previously. It's one of the most beneficial uses of both the staff and the spear in Eastern martial arts are used the exact same way in that aspect, where they will change the grip that they use to change the distance that they can attack from to confuse their opponent. So yeah, not a huge fan of how they changed Polearm Master. Moving on. Next feat, Resilient. I'm going to try and get through these before it turns into 2.5 hours. Resilient, no prereqs, not repeatable. Ability score increase. Choose one ability in which you lack saving throw proficiency. Increase the chosen ability score by 1. So this can be any ability score, and you gain saving throw proficiency with the chosen ability. So again, Resilient already exists in 5th edition, and basically is exactly the same. Choose an ability score, increase it by 1, and gain proficiency in saving throws, which is useful. It's boring because it doesn't give you anything cool to do, but it's useful getting proficiency, specifically if you notice that like your specific character has a detriment. Like if you're playing a barbarian and your wisdom is really low and you keep getting mind controlled, taking Resilient can be a simple way to get around the fact that you keep getting mind controlled, because even with a low modifier, just having proficiency with it can make a huge benefit. So, moving on. Ritual Caster. Prereq, Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma 13. Increase one of those by 1. Choose 2 first level spells that have the ritual tag from the Arcane, Divine, and Primal spell list. You always have those 2 spells prepared. You can cast them with any spell slot you have. The spell's spellcasting ability is the ability increased by this feat. And then Quick Ritual. With this benefit, you can cast a ritual spell that you have prepared using its regular casting time rather than expending the time for a ritual. Doing so doesn't require a spell slot. Once you cast a spell this way, you can't do it again until you finish a long rest. So, this is actually pretty cool. First things first, it lets you choose 2 first level spells from any spell list, and because it uses and instead of or, you could theoretically choose an arcane and a primal spell, or a divine and an arcane spell, whatever floats your boat. They use whatever ability score you increased with this, so you basically get to choose what ability score you want to use to cast these spells. You always have them prepared. The only limitation is they have to have a ritual tag, so it does cut a lot of the spell book out. But a lot of ritual spells are really useful. And with Quick Ritual, you can actually cast a ritual spell in combat and not have to waste a spell slot, which that's the big benefit of ritual spells in general, is you can increase the casting time by, I believe it's just 10 minutes, which means you're never using that in combat, because 10 minutes is 100 turns. You'll never do that. But you can just increase this casting time by 10 minutes, and then you don't waste a spell slot. So this is actually really interesting. As far as whether or not it's broken, it's been so long since I've played with rituals that I'd have to really kind of look over the different ritual spells just to see if this can be used to kind of break something. overall, I think it's interesting at the bare minimum. I think it's really interesting. So, yeah. Moving on. Need to take a drink. Sentinel. Yes, we love this one. Prereq, proficiency with any martial weapon. Ability score increase, strength or dex. Guardian, immediately after a creature within 5 feet of you takes the disengage action or hits a target other than you with an attack, you can make an opportunity attack against that creature. And then halt. When you hit a creature with an opportunity attack, creature speed becomes 0 for the rest of the turn. So, again, Sentinel is a remarkably useful feat. It effectively means that people can't disengage from you, which is nice. And you get to stop movement when you make opportunity attacks. Again, if you combine that with the Polearm Master, you become really, really useful, but it does take 8 levels to do that, generally. Or if you're a fighter, generally the first time you can do that is by 6th level, because that's the first time they get a second feat. But it's still a really good combo. So, yeah. Moving on. Sharpshooter. This is the other one that DMs hate. Excuse me. Proficiency, prereq, proficiency with any martial weapon. Ability score increase dex by 1, because that's what it is. Bypass cover, your ranged attacks with weapons. Ignore half cover and 3/4 covers. So that's another thing that I think they changed. Sharpshooter. Nope, they just kind of changed the wording a little bit. But so it does require weapon attacks. You couldn't use this for spells, but they have a spell feature, or they have a spell feat for that. Firing in melee, being within 5 feet of an enemy, doesn't impose disadvantage on your ranged attack rolls with weapons. So this is where, again, the character that I play in that campaign, the Gambit, basically. I took the gunner feat to get the firing in melee disadvantage taken away because it wasn't built into Sharpshooter. This I actually like because it does make sense and it fits. And then long shots. Attacking at long range doesn't impose disadvantage on your ranged attack rolls with weapons, which was also part of Sharpshooter. So the big difference with Sharpshooter is instead of giving you the -5 to attack plus 10 damage, which again, a lot of people hate, I'm not one of them. I use it on one of my characters. I like it. But instead of that, they give you basically the advantage that you normally would need to take Crossbow Expertise or Gunner to get. They just built it into Sharpshooter. And overall, I don't have a problem with that. Again, I like the extra damage, but this is just as useful. So, not a big deal. Moving on. I'm officially out of my my ginger ale. Next feat, Shield Master. Prereq shield training. Ability score, increase your strength score by 1. Shield Bash. If you attack a creature within 5 feet of you as part of the attack action and hit with a melee weapon, you can immediately bash the target with your shield if it's equipped. And see, here we call equipped, and before we were talking about drawn, so I don't know. Forcing the target to make a strength save. 8 plus strength plus proficiency. On a failed save, you knock the target prone or push it 5 feet away. You can use this benefit only once on each of your turns. And then interpose shield. If you make a dex save to take half damage, you can use your reaction to take no damage. So that already exists with Shield Master. And again, the old way Shield Master worked was you used your bonus action to do it. This one is part of your attack action, just like 2-weapon fighting. Otherwise, it's the same basic feat. And it's a useful feat. Again, the ability to knock a target prone is really useful, especially if you have multiple attacks. So again, you hit it with a melee weapon. Boom. You immediately hit it with a shield, knock it prone. Now your attacks have advantage against it, and its attacks have disadvantage until it stands up, which takes half its movement. So, useful. And then the interposed shield is always useful. Less damage is always useful. Moving on, the Skulker feat. Prereq, Dex 13. Ability score, increase your Dex score by 1. Blind sight, you get blind sight with a range of 10 feet. So you get 10 feet of blind sight. Fog of War. Exploding the distraction of battle. You have advantage on any dex check stealth to make as part of the hide action during combat. And then Sniper, if you make an attack roll while hidden and the roll misses, meaning the attack roll doesn't end the hidden condition on you. Skulker existed already, and it wasn't great, if I remember. It was you can try to hide when you're lightly obscured from creatures. When you're hidden from a creature and miss it with a ranged weapon attack, it doesn't reveal your position. And dim light doesn't impose disadvantage on your wisdom perception checks. No one uses the dim light thing. Like, it's a rule, and just nobody uses it. So giving blind sight, I think, is cool. Makes it a really useful ability. Blind sight out to 10 feet, I don't think is overpowered. Blind sight to 30 feet would be dumb. It's 10 feet, works perfectly. And then advantage on dex checks to hide, I think, is a little bit better than just, well, you can hide more often. Here, you actually succeed on hiding. And then Sniper thing, again, same as before. Moving on, Speedster. The word Speedster doesn't exist, but the feat is a different version of the mobile feat, which is one I really liked. Prereqs, Dex or Con plus 13. Ability score increase Dex or Con by 1. Speed increase. Your speed increases by 10 feet while you aren't wearing heavy armor. The original version of the mobile feat, which is what this one is effectively, just increase your speed by 10 feet. So heavy armor characters could still use it. The other thing, dash over difficult terrain. When you take the dash action on your turn, difficult terrain doesn't cost you extra movement for the rest of the turn. That was the same as the mobile feat. The big difference, the mobile feat made it so that if you made an attack, whether you hit or not, a creature could not take an opportunity attack against you. And that was the most useful aspect of the mobile feat, was just you could turn into a hit and run machine. Giving it to like a monk, you would be nigh unstoppable, because not only do you already have more speed than most other characters, now you're getting even more speed. So you could literally run in, hit 2 or 3 different people, and run out without taking any opportunity attacks. It was really awesome. I don't know anyone that ever complained about mobile, because so few people took it, because they really undervalue the ability to kind of hit and run. So yeah, I don't know why they took that away, because that was my favorite aspect of it. And I don't think it broke the game in any way, shape, or form, even when you were using like a barbarian or a monk that already had crazy high speeds. He was great. So yeah, not a fan of Speedster. I think it's dumb. Bring back the opportunity attack or something, because dashing over difficult terrain, again, difficult terrain is not used a ton in 5th edition. And the few times that it is used, it's generally caused by your party. So yeah, you get control over it. Moving on. Spell Sniper. Prereq, spellcaster your pack magic feature. Spell Sniper already exists. This is Sharpshooter for spells. Your attack rolls for spell ignore half cover and 3/4 covers. Casting a melee. Being within 5 feet of an enemy doesn't impose disadvantage on your attack rolls with spells, which is useful. Increase range. This is the other thing that they changed. When you cast a spell that has a range of at least 10 feet, and that requires you to make an attack roll, you can increase the spell's range by 60 feet. The original Spell Sniper was you doubled. When you cast a spell that requires you to make an attack roll, the spell's range is doubled. That caused issues, because there were certain spells that had attack rolls, like I think the Booming Blades, and those, an attack roll was built into it because there was a weapon attack, and people would use that to mean, well, now I can Booming Blade from 10 feet away instead of 5 feet, or things like that. It was weird, to be honest. And they actually changed both Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade. They changed it because it used to be range of 5 feet, and then they changed it to range of self, just to avoid that interaction. The other thing that was nice about Spell Sniper is it gave you a free cantrip. This one doesn't. But Spell Sniper was a full feat before, so you didn't get an ability score bonus. This one gives you the ability score bonus, doesn't give you a free spell. Most of the other stuff is identical to it. Oh, and it gives you the casting and melee thing. So overall, I think this is a little bit better version of that feat. Next one, moving on, is Warcaster. Spellcasting or pack magic. This is another one super, super useful. Increase intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by 1. Concentration. You have advantage on constitution saving throws you make to maintain concentration. Same thing as before. Reactive spell. When a creature provokes an opportunity attack from you by moving out of your reach, you can use your reaction to cast a spell at the creature rather than making an opportunity attack. Spell must have a casting time of 1 action and must target only that creature. And then somatic components. You can perform this somatic components of spells even when you have weapons or shield in one or both hands. So Warcaster, the big things for it. Warcaster meant you could use a shield while casting spells, which was useful. For the most part, Warcaster was used by Blade Singers and War Mages in general. I think Clerics use it as well. And a few Paladins would use it. But those are the big ones. And again, the somatic component thing was a big aspect of it. Concentration thing was really useful. And then the reactive spell was really useful. Because a lot of times, especially if you were a Blade Singer, a single attack from a Blade Singer wasn't really that useful. They didn't tend to do a ton of damage with their attacks. It was the fact that they were mixing in magic with their attacks. So reactive spell was really, really great. Even if you cast a cantrip with it, it was significantly more useful. And if you wanted to do something more powerful, like a disintegrate spell or something like that, like you could do some really powerful stuff as long as there's a spell that only hit a single character. So, yeah. Finally, we're almost done, guys. You get weapon training. Prereqs, nothing. But it is a 4th level feat. You have practiced extensively with a variety of weapons, gaining the following benefits. Increase strength or dex by 1, and then you gain martial weapon proficiency. The 5th edition version, you gain proficiency with 4 weapons. This is just all martial weapons. And I think that probably has to do with, I think most, if not all characters are now proficient with simple weapons. And so this just gives you proficiency with everything. Which again, I think makes more sense than just giving you 4 weapon proficiencies. So, yeah. Overall, final thoughts. This has been a long one. Overall, I like a lot of the feats here. I think they do interesting things. I do find it interesting that it seems like bonus actions are being relegated to things that you get from feats, whereas actions are relegated to things that you get from your class. Anything that would come from your class looks like it's going to be an action. Which is interesting, I guess. I'm not a huge fan of it because, again, action economy is a big thing in 5th edition. And so making it so the only way you get to use your bonus action is you take feats. Again, it means that you have to take feats. And it also means that ability score improvement feat, the first one we talked about, becomes less and less useful because now not only are you not getting the other benefits, but you can never get a bonus action ability using ability score improvement. And you're not, from as far as I can tell, you're not going to get bonus action abilities from your class anymore. So ability score improvement becomes next to useless. And looking for any feat that gives you a bonus action becomes significantly more powerful. And anything that doesn't give you a bonus action becomes a little less powerful. So yeah, otherwise, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of the fighting styles being feats, but I kind of understand why. The epic boons, I'm not a fan at all. Leave them as kind of an extra thing. Don't make them the 20th level ability of anything. They don't feel good. But, yeah. Otherwise, that is going to be all for me today. As always, remember, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, turn notifications on, all things super, super important in the comments down below. What was your favorite feat that we talked about? What do you think is the coolest? And do you think there's any feats that they haven't put here? Because I believe almost all of these are just PHB feats. And they've added more feats since then. Is there a feat in a non-PHB book that you'd like to see a 1D&D version of? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for me today. I'll see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.